Buying a 4x4 is an expensive decision, and if you make the wrong choice, it can lead to an expensive bill. Choosing what to go for in this vast market can be a daunting task, and in this video, I am going to help you decide which kind of 4x4, old or new, suits your needs the best. First, we shall start with old 4x4s. Old 4x4s don't have much technology, and this is their appeal. They are cheaper and easier to fix and maintain, simply because there are fewer things to go wrong, there are fewer things to replace, and when something does go wrong, it tends to be cheaper than that of a newer vehicle. The exterior design of old 4x4s is also boxier and arguably cooler, and also worth noting is that old 4x4s tend to be smaller. However, their smaller exterior dimensions don't necessarily mean that they have smaller interiors. You see, newer vehicles have thick doors and thick pillars to protect occupants in the event of an accident. Older 4x4s didn't have that, so a smaller 4x4 might have just as much space on the inside as a larger but newer one. Of course, this brings me to the most important point of them all. Old 4x4s aren't as safe as new ones, so if safety is your number one priority, then you will want to go for as new of a 4x4 as you can. Now, the best part about old 4x4s tends to be their build. Many of them have solid front and rear axles, which is a benefit when it comes to off-roading. A solid axle is basically a solid piece of steel that connects the wheels on each axle. This design is inherently stronger because of its solid design. It has less moving parts and can take more hits with less damage. It is also easier to fix and allows for more wheel articulation, which keeps wheels in contact with the ground for longer when off-roading, which therefore increases grip and increases stability. So a solid front and rear axle 4x4 tends to be more capable than an independent suspension 4x4. Independent suspension tends to be found on the newer models and provides better on-road handling because each wheel can move independently from the other, but isn't as strong due to more moving parts. If you do want to get an older 4x4, I would suggest having a look at the 80 series Land Cruiser, which in my opinion is the best Land Cruiser ever made because it blends the solid axles of the older models with newer coil springs which ride better and articulate better, and it also has more powerful engines which make it far more drivable on a daily basis. The second 4x4 I suggest you get is the old Land Rover Discovery 1. I own one. I absolutely love the Land Rover Discovery 1. I believe it is one of the most unique 4x4s ever made. It shares the same chassis as the Land Rover Defender and the Range Rover Classic, which means it has two solid axles, coil sprung solid axles, and it also has a lot of historical significance because of its participation in the Camel Trophy. The Camel Trophy was otherwise known as the Olympics of 4x4s, where teams competed against each other in some of the harshest environments on Earth. Next up, the TJ Wrangler is also a great choice, especially if you wanted to do some rock crawling. The TJ is the first coil-sprung Wrangler, and it uses the 4-liter straight-six engine, which is known for its reliability. So the TJ is a great vehicle. Some other 4x4s you might also want to keep in mind are the XJ Jeep Cherokee, the Nissan Patrol, if you can get one because it wasn't available in all countries. Of course, the 4Runners and or the Land Cruiser Prado if you're living in Europe. And finally, if you want something a bit cheaper, the Mitsubishi Pajero is also a good choice, but that wasn't available in the US either. But you can find some examples on bringatrailer.com. The same is true for the Prados and for the Nissan Patrol. Some other things to consider before buying an old 4x4 is plainly and simply driving an old 4x4 is less romantic than it actually looks. Having a vehicle that is upwards of 20 years old will come with its fair share of problems regardless of which brand made the vehicle. So you will need to do some repairs, you will need to spend some money and time on the vehicle, and it is all a part of the old 4x4 journey. So if you are not willing to do that, then a new 4x4 is the way to go. That being said, old 4x4s are nostalgic. They reflect the history of the country they were made in, and if you love old vehicles, it can be incredibly rewarding to drive one and to maintain one. Now, moving on to the newer models. The suspension of newer 4x4s tends to be independent front and rear, and some of them have air suspension. Air suspension improves ride quality and also offers the ability to increase or decrease the ride height of the vehicle. So if when you are on the road and you want a lower center of gravity to improve handling, you have the air suspension at the lower setting, and once you hit the dirt and need the ground clearance, you can push a button and the vehicle will raise itself, providing you with more ground clearance. New 4x4s also have great traction control systems. Many of them don't have actual diff lockers and make up for the lack of lockers with traction control. Traction control can also act as a safety aid on road, so it is not only used for off-road purposes. Of course, newer 4x4s also have a lot more technology in the form of hill descent control, 360-degree cameras, crawl control, or something similar depending on the company, which basically enables the car to apply throttle and brakes without the driver's input to help get the car unstuck, or to drive the car over extremely uneven terrain where the input of the actual driver won't do as good of a job as the computer on board. Of course, aside from the off-road part, technology moves even further in the form of autonomous braking, autonomous driving, in some cases wireless charging, Android Auto, Apple CarPlay, and many more features that make living with a modern 4x4 easier than living with an old one. Finally, and as mentioned in the previous section, safety is by far the biggest benefit of a new 4x4 because you can't actually make an older 4x4 that much safer. New 4x4s are built from the ground up with safety in mind, so they have cabins that will protect occupants in the event of a crash, but they also have technology that will avoid the crash in the first place. Old 4x4s do not have that. If you are in the market for a new 4x4, I would suggest having a look at the upcoming J250 Toyota Land Cruiser, which has an independent front suspension, a solid rear axle, and a hybrid powertrain. So it blends the low emissions and efficiency of a new vehicle with the tough underpinnings of an older one. The new Bronco, not the Bronco Sport, the normal full-sized Bronco, is also a great choice. It will be a more capable vehicle than the Land Cruiser, but it might not be as reliable and as efficient, although we are not sure yet because the new Land Cruiser hasn't been tested. Next up, I would suggest having a look at the new Defender, which is by far the most modern vehicle on the list. It has independent front and rear suspension with air springs, so it can adjust its ride height. It offers a great ride quality, very powerful engines, and a really comfortable interior. So if motorway cruising is something you will be doing really often, the Defender is a great choice, and it can also handle off-road terrain thanks to its very capable traction control system and great ground clearance thanks to the air suspension. The Defender though doesn't have much articulation and tends to lift wheels when off-roading. Finally, we have the Jeep Wrangler, which is by far the most old school vehicle here. It has a solid front and rear axle, so it is very modifiable and it can tackle very difficult trails. That being said, it won't be as good on road, and it is also less safe than the other vehicles on this list. So let's briefly summarize. Which 4x4 should you get? I would suggest getting an old 4x4 if first and foremost you do not mind putting up with less safety features, more cabin noise, a less powerful engine, and a less comfortable and technologically advanced driving experience. These are the main sacrifices you need to make when driving an old 4x4. That being said, there are also many benefits. It is cheaper to buy, it is cheaper to maintain, and if you pick the correct one, you will be able to build a very capable off-roader that can be maintained at home and will go to any place a new 4x4 will go, and even beyond that. A well-built old 4x4 is more capable than a new one. A new 4x4 is more suited to someone someone who perhaps needs to drive their family around on a daily basis, needs a safe vehicle, and prioritizes comfort, technology, and on-road driving manners. Some new 4x4s like the Wrangler or the Ineos Grenadier can also be built to tackle some very difficult trails. However, keep in mind that if you build a vehicle to that extent, then you will be losing the benefits of a new 4x4 on-road. The more capable you make a vehicle off-road, the less capable it becomes on-road, and the opposite is also true. So this is pretty much everything for this video. If you have any questions, leave them in the comments down below and I will reply and help you with those. If you have found it helpful, please consider subscribing, and if you would like to help the channel a little further, you can do so by clicking the join button right next to the subscribe button. I will see you in the next one.